At the end of our presentations, we'll have a question and answer session moderated by Megan, and we will receive questions in the chat function in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. At any time during today's event, you can enter your question into that chat box. When you enter your question, please enter your name, your company name, your city, and your zip code. All that's behind us, let's dive in. Today, we'll be discussing opportunities for small businesses to support NASA's Artemis program in California's 23rd and 25th congressional districts. I have a fantastic lineup of both hosts and NASA small business experts to dive into this topic. And I'd like to introduce you to our co-host for today's discussion now. So joining NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, it's our honor to have both Congressman Kevin McCarthy and Congressman Mike Garcia. Congressman McCarthy represents California's 23rd district, home to our very own Armstrong Flight Research Center, and Congressman McCarthy also holds the esteemed position of House Minority Leader. Congressman Garcia represents California's 25th district, which is also home to Armstrong facilities, and Congressman Garcia serves on the House Subcommittee on Space and Aeronautics, which manages the authorization of NASA. So with that, Congressman McCarthy, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody joining us. Jim, it's good to see you again, and David, and especially Mike Garcia, my colleague. And Mike and I get to share the aerospace corridor. And as Jim knows, he's been out here long before he was even the administrator. He was showing me some of his flights back in the day, and I know David was out there as well. We have a long history throughout the aerospace corridor of being a part of all of what NASA does. From the early testing to breaking the sound barrier, to even now from the private side, which you guys invested so greatly in. And the one thing we know is that small business is critical to so many of those endeavors. A lot of these businesses start very small, and now we look at NASA partnering with SpaceX, what Mojave has been able to do. But really, what we have found out at Armstrong is just amazing year over year. And I always take a great pride just walking in those doors. And even when we're California, have a little of Hollywood in there, I dream of Genie. The opening started right there. We take the tradition of the past and apply it to a changing future. And the future for NASA is so bright. And we know it's critical throughout both our districts. So especially the Artemis and others, we want to make the small businesses a key part of that. So I appreciate you holding this today. And do we go now back over to my colleague, Mr. Garcia, he might only be here just a few months, but he's head and shoulders above so many when it comes to space, because he's been flying for our nation for quite some time, and it's critical of why he was representing this area is how well he knows the aerospace corridor. So I yield back to you, or however I do this now. Mr. Garcia, I guess the floor is yours.
There we go. All right. I wasn't able to come off mute there for a second. Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for that introduction. Been here a few months, hopefully for several more years, and getting to represent the beautiful 25th congressional district. And one of the key valleys in our district is called the Antelope Valley. It's abbreviated with an AV, and it's affectionately called as the Aerospace Valley because of everything that the leader just described. It's home to Plant 42, all of NASA's support there for the Edwards operations out there. And as you look at our district from east to west, there's two other valleys, the Santa Clarita Valley and then also the Simi Valley. And what we're seeing and what is our reality is that up in the Antelope Valley, we've got the large primes with Northrop and Lockheed and NASA as well. And as you work your way from east to west, it's like a supply chain river, really. The Santa Clarita and Simi Valley are homes to some of the smaller businesses that are really the lifeblood of the 25th district, but also to this magnificent NASA franchise and everything that Jim is leading us through right now. And it really is a rebirth of the aerospace and space exploration. I think it's very cool that we had this call, Jim, on what is National Aviation Day, celebrating our nation's steep history in aviation. And when you think about how you put things in perspective, when you think about just 117 years ago, we were unable to crack the code on how to actually fly vehicles in our own atmosphere. And now we're talking about the Artemis program launching to the moon, being a staging zone for deep space exploration and hopefully at least to get to Mars in the nearer term. And this on the heels just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 20 days, when we launched Perseverance, and with the expectations of flying a helicopter within the very thin atmosphere of Mars. So a lot of exciting things, and I know I gave Jim grief because we should have been flying a jet aircraft in the Martian atmosphere for the first time, but we'll start with a helicopter. That's all good. So, thank you for doing this. We have to keep pushing ourselves forward. We've got to keep investing in all of our aerospace endeavors, both here on this planet and also those going to the moon, going to Mars under NASA's leadership. And we're gonna make history. Our district, besides the home of a lot of the suppliers and a lot of the primes supporting NASA's efforts, is also where a lot of the testing has been done. We tested in Petey Valley in our district, to the west of the end of our district, the engines that actually launched a lot of our astronauts. So we take a lot of pride in the space programs. We understand the value both financially, but also in terms of pride of country, movement and evolution of scientific endeavors throughout the country, and really being a leader around the globe and hopefully throughout other planets here very soon. So I really appreciate you holding this, Jim. Good to see you again. Leader, thanks for also doing this, and Keegan, great to see you again as well. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Garcia, and thank you, Congressman McCarthy. What an honor to be with you both today. I'll tell you, it seems like just yesterday, Congressman McCarthy and I were flying out to the Mojave Airport to look at some really amazing capabilities that were developed there. Of course, we also visited Edwards Air Force Base and Armstrong Flight Research Center. Congressman McCarthy has been an amazing champion, not just for space, but how do we reform space so that we can actually provide more opportunities for space than ever before. And that's, of course, done through commercial industry. And so Representative McCarthy has been an amazing champion. I remember that from my days in the House. And, of course, Congressman Garcia, we can never have too many Navy pilots in Congress. I hope everybody knows that. It's good to know you, good to get to know you better. I wish we could have had the opportunity to serve together in the House, but I came to NASA, and now you're in the House. But you're going to do an amazing job, especially in that area with all of the aeronautics going on. A lot of people forget that, and I say this over and over again, and a lot of people forget the first A in NASA is aeronautics. And when you think about Antelope Valley, and when you think about the Mojave Spaceport and Edwards Air Force Base and the Armstrong Flight Research Center, what an amazing capability for our nation right there. It's really amazing. And of course, NASA's big projects there, the X-59 low boom flight demonstrator. Congressman Garcia, when you and I used to fly F-18s, we created a boom when we went supersonic. What we're trying to do now is fly supersonic without creating a boom. We call it a low boom. There will be a boom, but think of it more like a rumble. And so creating the requirements so that the FAA can give permission to fly from one side of the country to the other side of the country in a matter of a couple of hours rather than 6 hours. That's the objective. And because of the investments that NASA has made and doing it with a public-private partnership, we're going to see those capabilities manifest themselves. And that's going to be an export for the United States of America. It's going to result in us being able to improve our balance of payments deficit, which of course everybody is familiar. That's what my boss, President Trump, talks about all the time, the trade deficit. How do we get on the right side of the trade deficit? And aeronautics is a way to do it. We have a trade surplus in aeronautics. Our goal is to make sure we're making the right investments so that we keep that trade surplus and grow it. That's ultimately the objective. A couple of things that are important to note, and then we'll get into some of the small business. I know there's a lot of small businesses here that want to hear about what we need to be thinking about. But some important things to think about: commercialization of space, which I know Congressman McCarthy has been focused on for many years now. We just saw the United States of America launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil for the first time since the retirement of the space shuttle back in 2011. And it was done not because NASA purchased, owned, and operated the hardware, but we bought a service. Make no mistake, we invested side by side with commercial industry, but at the end of the day, our goal is to be one customer of many customers in a very robust commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. So we're doing commercial resupply of the International Space Station right now. And the thing that we just saw happen a few months ago now, was commercial crew to the International Space Station. The next big leap is going to be commercial space stations themselves. And we do this for a reason. We want to improve the lives of people here on Earth. And when we think about industrialized biomedicine, pharmaceuticals, the ability to compound pharmaceuticals in microgravity, something you can't do, you can compound pharmaceuticals, but we can do it in space in a much different way that actually has, we can create new medicines, and we have. We can create new immunizations, vaccines. We've advanced vaccines for salmonella on the International Space Station, which doesn't seem like a big challenge in the United States, but in a lot of countries that are not as fortunate as the United States, salmonella is the third leading cause of death among infants. So when we make those investments into those kind of vaccines, it has huge implications for saving lives all over the world. When we think about a vaccine for pneumonia, for example, which has been advanced on the International Space Station, and now a lot of people all over the nation are getting pneumonia vaccines. But it's industrialized biomedicine. Things like printing human organs in 3D. Imagine using your own adult stem cells. Congressman Garcia, take you for example. We could take your own adult stem cells, from there extract your skin cells, extract stem cells, and then use those to create your own tissue in the microgravity of space. If we did that in the gravity well of Earth, the tissue would just go flat, and it would have no use. But space, the microgravity of space, it replicates, if you will, a mother's womb in so many ways, so it can grow in 3 dimensions. So industrialized biomedicine is going to be one of the ways that we commercialize space in general. Also advanced materials, we can talk a lot about that. But the goal here is to commercialize space as much as possible for a reason, so that we can go sustainably to the moon. The president gave us an agenda. He said, go to the moon sustainably. In other words, stay. We love the Apollo program. Now we want the Artemis program. Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo. We're now going to the moon to stay. We're going with commercial partners, international partners, but we're also going to learn how to live and work on another world for long periods of time, using the resources of that other world, in this case the moon and the hundreds of millions of tons of water ice, and then taking all of that knowledge onto Mars. The president gave us an objective. We're going to put an American flag on Mars, but we're also going to go with a coalition of international partners. So it's a really exciting time for space. And the president has not just given us the agenda, he's also backed it up with his budget requests, and we're so grateful for the support that we've had in a bipartisan way for achieving these objectives. And so it's really a good time at NASA. I'm grateful for this opportunity, I'll tell you that. And I would also add, as it relates to Mojave Spaceport specifically, one of my big initiatives as the NASA administrator was to figure out ways how to utilize the commercial suborbital capabilities that exist that largely were developed right there at Mojave. When we think about scaled composites and Spaceship Two. And we have opened up that area now to where NASA, for the first time, we're buying services for commercial suborbital space flights. Now we're saying we want not just science demonstrations and technology demonstrations, but now we want human-tended payloads going into suborbital space, and NASA is buying the service. We're not owning and operating the hardware. And of course, the next step, which we recently announced, is the idea that we're going to actually use our astronauts to actually go on those flights and do some training and develop capabilities that will eventually have huge implications for orbital space as well. So the Mojave Spaceport is a great capability for the nation. So many different amazing technologies have been developed there. Massive space systems, they're developing the ability to land on the surface of the moon, using a technology that is going to enable us to, right now we've got a robot going to Mars. It's going to land in February, and that robot is going to use terrain relative navigation to pinpoint land in some of the harshest environments we've ever landed on Mars before. And we go there to those locations because that's where the highest probability of finding evidence of ancient life, or even maybe we're talking about microbial life, but there could very well be life on Mars even today. We don't know, but we need to go find out. So I'm going to stop talking for a moment. This is really about how do we engage all of the amazing small businesses in the Antelope Valley and at the Mojave Spaceport and the companies that provide services to the Armstrong Flight Research Center. How do we engage small businesses in ultimately what will be our agenda in low Earth orbit, what our agenda is at the Moon, and eventually Mars? And for that, I want to turn to Jen Gustetic. She's done really amazing work when it comes to the Small Business Innovation and Research program at NASA. She's the program executive officer for that activity, and she's done amazing work. And then after Jen Gustetic, we're going to go to Glenn Delgado. He's the associate administrator of small business programs at NASA. And just so everybody knows, and I'm going to embarrass Glenn Delgado here for a second, but every agency in the federal government, we get a grade from the Small Business Administration as to how well we do, making sure that small businesses are included in our portfolio, in our agenda. We've had an A now for like 7 years in a row because of Glenn Delgado and his team. And it's also true that this year, right now, I just got an email last week, NASA has had the highest grade it's ever had in including small businesses. When Glenn got to NASA, we were at a C. Now we're at an A. Now we're at the highest A that we've ever had. So we'll start off with Jen Gustetic. She's the program executive officer for Small Business Innovation and Research at NASA. Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Bridenstine. Hi, folks. I'm Jen Gustetic. As the Administrator said, I'm the program executive for the SBIR and STTR programs, and I'm going to take a little bit of time today to explain to you exactly what those programs and acronyms mean and how you can get involved. But before I start, I want to take a moment to thank Minority Leader McCarthy and Congressman Garcia for bringing us all together today to talk about how we can encourage California small businesses to get more involved with NASA. We at the NASA SBIR and STTR program know just how vitally important small businesses are to NASA's missions and want to extend our most sincere thank you to both of you for the commitment you've shown to our program and California's aerospace-focused small businesses. So thank you to both of you. Next slide. We're going to cover three big areas today. First, we're going to run through a little bit of what the NASA SBIR and STTR program does within NASA and for our small business partners. Second, we'll talk about how we're going to work with Congress to help our program to grow its impact on small businesses in California and around the country. And finally, we'll cover changes that our program has made due to the uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic to help our small business partners weather the storm. Next slide. I thought we'd start with going over what our program is designed to accomplish. The NASA SBIR and STTR programs are tasked with furthering relevant research and building capabilities for NASA, the commercial aerospace industry, and the nation as a whole. We partner with small businesses through the SBIR portion of our program, and we also partner with research institutions and universities through the STTR portion. Even though our program technically falls under one of the agency's 4 mission directorates, the Space Technology Mission Directorate, we are tied to everything NASA does, including the first A in NASA, as the Administrator mentioned. We work with human exploration, space technology, science, and aeronautics, literally everything the agency does. In order to support NASA, we function both as an R&D program and as a seed fund. What do I mean by that? As an R&D program, which stands for Research and Development, we fund the maturation of technology for which NASA is the primary customer and help maintain the aerospace industrial base through those investments. As a seed fund, we're investing in disruptive capabilities in emerging markets, increasing the country's competitive advantage and generating opportunities for job creation across the country. Next slide. Our goal is to introduce new technologies and ideas when and where they're needed most. To find these technologies, we've invested in small businesses and research institutions in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, and we do so throughout the year. For example, we announced our 2020 Phase 1 SBIR and STTR award selections earlier this summer. our program awarded $51 million to 312 small businesses from 44 states across the country, including 86 awards to small businesses in California. Now, before I dive further into the specifics of our program's awards, I really want to note that it's important to recognize that we are not the only SBIR and STTR program in the federal government. In fact, we're one of only 11 programs that the SBA administers on behalf of the federal government. NASA's annual investments, our awards that we make at NASA, make up just 5% of the over $4 billion per year that SBIR programs across the government invest in American small businesses. So the SBIR program across the government invests a lot of money annually for small businesses to do research and development. You should definitely make sure to check it out if you're a small business that does technology development. Next slide. On this map, you'll see a breakdown of the total number of SBIR and STT awards listed by state since the program began in 1982. Over the years, the program has made a total of, now brace yourself, 3,730 awards to small businesses in the state of California. That is the highest award total for any state in the country. So you guys are rocking it with your participation in the SBIR and STTR program. We're proud of our outreach and our efforts to increase the geographic diversity of participation in the program across the country. Our average annual award amount has also been on the rise. In fact, in the past 2 years, the program has funded an average of $157 million in Phase 1 and Phase 2 contracts to about 500 proposals from small businesses each and every year. Next slide. I've been talking about the various phases of our program and just want to ensure that everyone understands the basics of each phase. I won't go over every detail, but at a high level, a Phase 1 award is what we like to call the idea phase, where Phase 2 is focused on the actual development, demonstration, and delivery of the innovation itself. It is our goal to help all small business participants graduate to Phase 3, when their innovative technologies, products, and services make their way into NASA missions and the commercial marketplace. But to put it plainly, we recognize that getting to a Phase 3 is very, very difficult. Phase 1 and Phase 2 awards alone are typically not enough to support a company's journey to commercialization. So our program has created additional opportunities to help firms get there, and that's been a particular focus of my time as being program executive. We do that with more than just funding. Through initiatives like the I-Corps program, which provides business assistance and training to our Phase 1 small businesses to help them understand how to do better customer discovery, and our various post-Phase 2 vehicles that you can see on this slide that help to support small businesses as they transition their technologies, readying them for either commercialization into the marketplace or infusion into a NASA mission. Now that we've gone through the basics of the program, let's talk more about what real-world success has looked like for a couple of California's SBIR awardees. Next slide. I'd like to start with Mass and Space Systems that was mentioned by the administrator earlier, which, as you know, is based in the Minority Leaders District in Mojave. The company has received 8 awards from the NASA SBIR program since 2010 for various innovations. For example, as part of its 2 current Phase 2 awards, NASA is validating lunar lander damage models to ensure reliable and safe landing for manned and unmanned landers, as well as testing out a different way to keep spacecraft systems warm enough to get through the lunar night. And in addition to its success with the SBIR program, NASA has had some noteworthy wins within other parts of NASA. For example, the company will be flying SBIR technologies on their platforms under a joint effort between the NASA SBIR program and the Flight Opportunities program that Jim also alluded to earlier. And the company was also recently selected for a $75 million award under the NASA CLIP program to deliver 9 scientific payloads to the moon as part of the Artemis program. Mastin is also a company who took advantage of the I-Corps training that we offer to help them on their commercialization journey, and I'm sure they'd be willing to talk to firms that are trying to understand if I-Corps is a good thing to participate in. Commercial industry is critical to making NASA's lunar and other missions a reality, and we are proud that one of our SBIR awardees has been able to contribute so much to the agency's priorities. Another quick story I want to share with you is about Honeybee Robotics. It's also on this slide. Based in nearby Altadena. NASA is preparing to launch the Viper mission to the south pole of the moon in 2023 as part of the Artemis program, and Honeybee Robotics is one of the providers of the instruments that will fly on Viper. The success of Viper and Honeybee Robotics is an example of the mutual benefits of the SBIR and STTR programs. The company's technology is directly benefiting NASA's missions, while our seed funding led to the company's tremendous growth, as Honeybee is now actually classified as a large business after being acquired in 2017. And I think the quote on this slide is particularly powerful to see the role that SBIR can play in the formation of a company and its growth. In addition to these two examples, I'd also encourage you to check out our website, sbir.nasa.gov, that has a ton of other success stories from other inspiring cases and companies across the country. Next slide. While we're always thrilled to see the success of companies like NASA and Honeybee, we know these wins aren't possible without our partners in Congress, and we rely on them to help our program and therefore our small businesses grow through a variety of legislative authorities. For those of you who may not be familiar, our program is authorized by the Small Business Committee and is set to expire in 2022, in 2 years. For those of you who may not be familiar, one of the most important things that past reauthorizations have given us is flexibility, including the administrative pilot program. This is sometimes referred to as the 3% administrative funding. This funding allows us to modernize and also increase the impact of our investments. For example, the I-4 program that I mentioned earlier is funded through these 3% funds. We also use this funding to conduct a lot of outreach, including participation in the SBIR Road Tour, which is put on with other SBIR programs to target underrepresented states, and the NASA HBCU MSI Technology Infusion Road Tour, which provides an open platform for representatives of historically Black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions to learn about our program and get involved. Additionally, we use this funding to put on an annual industry day, which might be of interest to a number of you in California, designed for businesses to interact with and learn more about our program. This year, that event, the Innovation and Opportunity Conference, we call it, will be held from October 20th through 22nd, completely virtually. Registration will be opening soon, and our program's website will have all those details. We look forward to having many of your firms join us. But there's still more flexibility that would be useful to our program, especially as we seek to include more small businesses in the Artemis mission. Last year, NASA submitted 2 legislative proposals to the Hill, which are briefly described on this slide. These flexibilities offer the ability to get larger dollar value awards to small businesses more quickly, specifically to enable them to meaningfully contribute to Artemis in the near and medium term. If any lawmakers on the call today have questions, please reach out and we'll get you connected with the right folks at NASA to answer those related to these legislative proposals. Next slide. Finally, we recognize that COVID-19 continues to pose hardships for many small businesses across the country, and our program has taken proactive steps to address the needs of our vital small business research and development community. I specifically call your attention to the bullet on the left-hand side on the bottom. As we bumped up the next phase 1 solicitation for SBIR and STTR from its original release date of this upcoming January to release on November 9th instead, to make us another funding opportunity available sooner to our small businesses. So mark your calendar for November 9th. That's earlier than you're used to seeing our solicitation come out. Next slide. If you have questions, our website's a great place to start. If there's anything you can't find, you're also welcome to send me a note. My email's up on the screen, and I'll point you in the right direction. And now I'll turn it over to Glenn Delgado, and I will welcome your questions later in the session.
Thank you very much, Jen. I appreciate it, and good job as usual. I'd like to thank the Congressman for being on board. And the kind words from Administrator Bridenstine, I appreciate them. I'll get started with my slides for you. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of the trend chart that NASA spends with small business. These are prime awards, which means NASA awards them directly to small businesses. And as you can see, we've had a steady growth. And this is the end of FY19. We're about to close out FY20. This was the highest amount of money we've ever done to small businesses directly. We awarded over $3 billion directly to small businesses. And as you see, we don't talk about doing business with small businesses. We do business with small businesses. Next slide, please. This is also our subcontracting dollar trend analysis. As you can see, we work very closely with all of our large primes that are available to us that are working on our major programs. And if you look, they still did $2.97 billion with small businesses. So we work very well with them, and we also make sure that they give high-tech opportunities to the small businesses that are critical in them making the success of the NASA mission. And if you look, again, that's almost $3 billion. So combined, the between prime and subcontracting in just one year, one fiscal year, we awarded over $6 billion directly to small business, which is a major achievement and the highest that the agency has ever done. Go to the next slide. I just want to talk since Armstrong, their Flight Research Center is in both districts. Just wanted to give you an idea of how Armstrong did at the end of last year. As you can see, with the support of the Center Director, David McCarthy, who's on the call also, they exceeded all of their goals except for one, which they were very, very close on working on, which is their service-disabled vet. But every one of their small business service-disabled, women-owned, the STD, and Hub Zone, they did very well in exceeding their goals that are assigned from my office to them to achieve. They did a very good job, and thank you, David, for your leadership out there. We greatly appreciate it. We'll go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea, again, of subcontracting, a lot of companies are a little leery of doing subcontracting because they want to be the ones in charge of the contracting. As you know, NASA's mission is a very complicated and high-tech mission, and we do use a lot of large businesses to accomplish our various missions. So subcontracting is very important for us, and we work very closely, as I said before, making sure that our large primes meet their subcontracting goals. We make sure that they have significant goals, and we make sure that the work that they're providing is high-tech work, and they mentor the small businesses as they are doing the work to make sure that they can succeed in the mission, because it makes the large primes succeed and makes NASA succeed. So we're on them, pretty well. It is a great partnership with them. Just to give you a couple of things, you can see the Orion program, which is still part of our list. They did $1.7 billion to small businesses since they started, and with over 2,000 small business subcontractors. And the same thing with the Space Launch System, another almost $2 billion, and another, 2,000 small businesses that work with them. So, looking at subcontracting, $3 billion is not anything to laugh about in one fiscal year. We are making sure that they do that, and we make sure it is good technology and they're training the small businesses. You go to the next slide. Just to give you an idea of who does business with NASA, these are our top contractors. As you can see, the top one there is the California Institute of Technology, which is also known as JPL, which is also right outside of LA. They are one of our biggest contractors. A lot of people think that they're one of the NASA centers. They are a quasi-center. They're an FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center. And we do about $3 billion a year with them right up the top. And then you'll start seeing names that you recognize: Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, Jacob, and SpaceX, and going down the line. And you can see the dollar values that we give to them. It's not, some change. It's pretty good money, and there are very good subcontracting opportunities with them. Go to the next slide. These are our NAICS codes that we use, and those are not familiar with NAICS codes. Every product is aligned in a classification. When you're in business, you'll start knowing these off the top of your head, and if you don't know what they are, you can always give us a call or go to a PTAC or the SBA, and they can walk you through all of these things. But of course, NASA is an R&D center, basically an R&D agency. So research and development is our biggest NAICS code that we spend dollars in. So we do about $8 billion a year in research and development. So that's why we tie very closely with Jim on the SBIR program, because that's our biggest bread and butter. We go from $8 million there to our next NAICS code is only $2 billion or $2.6 billion. So R&D is what we do, and if you're in that arena, you're a small business, please come see us. As you see, we don't talk it, we walk it. We do awards for small business in high technology areas. Okay, next slide. Just to give you an idea, a lot of people have heard a lot of things about category management, and that everybody's trying to condense things down and shrink the contracting footprint around there. NASA's, we have to follow federal mandates and OMB's giving us direction on how we got to go. So this is going to give you an idea of how we're going to reorganize our procurements a little bit. So you can see that we combined our two West Coast facilities, the Armstrong Flight Research Center and the Ames Research Center. Now, Armstrong, is right around the LA area, and Ames is at the San Francisco area, and Armstrong is down near the LA area. And you can see these are the types of procurements they're going to be doing on an agency level for us or a regional center. And then you can see the GRC, which is Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, and Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, and Johnson Space Flight Center down in Houston, and KSC down in Florida. and Langley Research Center is in Virginia. Marshall is in Alabama, and NSSC is in Mississippi, as well as Stennis FSC. And you can get an idea. So if you're in any of these areas, you want to see the center that's going to be buying it for the agency. And this chart will give you a good idea. And you will have access to these charts, so you don't have to scribble down everything very quickly. Okay, next slide. Now, one thing that NASA does that no other federal agency does is we give you guys a listing of all of our active contracts. And just to give you an idea, when an agency gets its budget, normally for procurement spend, about 60 to 70% of that spend is on reoccurring buys. So it's things that we have purchased before. And about 30% of it's for new stuff that they're looking at doing. So what we do is we keep track of every one of our current contracts, and we try to tell you guys what center purchased it, what NAICS code it's under, what the contract name is, who the current contractor is, the prime contractor, along with the contract number, how we procured it, the value, but most importantly, the end date. So you can look at that, if you know the federal acquisition cycle for recompeting, we start 18 to 24 months in advance. So right here, we're telling you this is when the contract ends, so you just do the math, go backwards. You'll know that you're going to be able to start your procurement, your bidding proposal, putting your team together, and cycle time enough for us to, where you can put in a good proposal. And this is available on our OSBT app that we have in both the Google Store and the Apple Store, where you can download it and you can get this type of information. It's the best business development tool that you never invented, okay, because we can help you out very well with that. We go to the next slide. These are a list of a couple of our upcoming outreach events that we're doing. We work a lot with the various chambers of commerce and SBA and PTAX and things of that nature. So the next one we're going to be looking at is we're doing a Women's Chamber of Commerce Spotlight. We're doing like a 4-hour block with them where we're doing matchmaking with every one of the NASA centers. I'll be giving a speech and things of that nature. So we work a lot out there. You heard Jen talk about the HBCU. We do a lot of work with HBCUs, and we're doing our own virtual outreach event in October. Just to give you an idea, we're always out there trying to do stuff and get more information at those links. Next slide. I'm going to talk about this one kind of quickly because I'm on a clock, so we'll make sure that we get it done on time. The best thing, and this is true for all federal agencies, you need to start with the Small Business Center, Small Business Specialist at that center. In NASA's case, there's a person at every one of the 10 centers, and they know what happens at that center. They know who has the money, they know who has the requirement, and they know their contracting cycle. So that is always going to be your first point of entry, and that is true for Navy, Army, Air Force, any federal agency that you want to deal with. You'll need to build a relationship with that small business specialist, and then in turn, they can also help you build a relationship with the Industry Small Business Liaison Officer, which is an SBLO. So everybody, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, they all have specialists that work with small businesses, just like the federal government does, and they're called Small Business Liaison Officers. And that's where we do our subcontracting information, stuff of that nature. You need to learn about the various missions, as we'll see in a second. Each NASA centers do something different, so you need to be aware of what that center does, and always come to them with a solution instead of asking, what can you guys do for me? You should go to them saying, I know your mission, and this is what I can do for you. So you go down all of those lists there. The most important thing on the bottom is the source of thought synopsis and the request for information. That is how all the decisions are made, whether the procurement's going out as full and open, where everybody can bid on it, or if it's going to go out as a small business set-aside. So when a federal agency sends out a source of thought, it evaluates those responses that come in, and if we have enough interest from small business, we can set it aside for a small business set-aside. If not, we have to go out full and open. So anytime your small businesses see that, you need to respond and do it properly. Don't just staple a copy of your brochure to the source of thought and send it back. They ask very specific questions, so just make sure you can answer those questions. Okay, next slide. This map gives you an idea of who all the small business specialists are at NASA. And you just click on each of them, and it'll take you to their website and their information. Next slide. This gives you an idea of which ones are the research centers, space centers, science center. I talked about JPLs and SFRDC, and then NASA Shared Services. They have the names, phone numbers, and email links that you can go directly to those small business specialists. And go next slide. At the top is the more important information. The www.osdt is our website, and the small business at nasa.gov is our mailbox. If you have a question, you can go to either one of those things, and it'll answer every question that you have available. I think that's it. Next slide. Yep, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it back to Megan and let her do her thing. And thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Really appreciate that. That was a great presentation from Glenn and Jen. At this point, I did want to let everyone know that we have Director McBride on the line with us from Armstrong here. So, sir, if you wouldn't mind saying hello to everyone real quick.
Well, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Congressman McCarthy, Congressman Garcia, and Administrator Bridenstine for your support of Armstrong and our mission of advancing technology and science through flight. We've been involved from the X-1, the first supersonic flights in 1947, through our current support of the small business private space activities in the Flight Opportunities Program, and also SBIR activities in aeronautics research and science as well. And the current SBIR success program in California that's big for us is the F-57 Maxwell, which is an all-electric aircraft that started as an SBIR with ESRO in San Luis Obispo and Scale Composites in Mojave, and 23rd Congressional District is coming together well. Thank you all for your support.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us, David. It's great to have you, and I am sure people know the amazing work that you're doing there at Armstrong. It really is astonishing, and for an aviator like myself, I wish Armstrong was out here where I am. A lot of cool stuff.
Great. And at this time, what I'd like to do is start off with Congressman McCarthy. Sir, do you have any questions for our panelists or any things that you'd like to kick off the Q&A section with?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you. And a couple key points that I thought you brought up. And thank you, David McBride, for being there in the years that we've worked so closely together out there at Armstrong. But I've seen the transformation of NASA. I mean, you're picking bigger goals to go more places, and I applaud you for that, Jim. But also you realize you don't want to go it alone. That we're able to achieve these things, like when you and I were sitting down in Florida with the President, the synergy you get from other businesses being a part, and especially with commercial where they're going. And Mike Garcia and I will tell you, this corridor where we were was the reason why most small businesses are in California, is because from everything that you're doing part of there. But we also have a new expansion. This is one thing. Give me some of the missions that you're looking towards, so those on this call can actually think about that as well. But also we have Space Force now. You work with defense, but also that combination that we could help and assist in that manner as well, if there are some opportunities here.
Yeah, those are all great points. So when we think about NASA, we want to make sure that wherever there is a commercial marketplace that already exists, we want to be a customer. We want to be one customer. We want lots of different private companies to be customers, and academia to be customers, and other government agencies to be customers. NASA needs to be a customer. We don't need to purchase, own, and operate our own hardware. We don't want to compete against the private sector. And so we want to be a customer, but it's also important that we have numerous providers that are competing against each other on cost, on innovation, on safety. And so when we think about low Earth orbit, these are the activities that we're making happen very rapidly right now. When we think about suborbital space, which I know is very near and dear to the Mojave Spaceport, one of my first initiatives as a NASA administrator is, how does NASA be a customer of those suborbital flights? And then the next big step is, I think we have learned a lot. We've seen it with the success of the SpaceX Falcon rocket with the Dragon crew capsule taking our astronauts to the International Space Station. We know the business model that works. It has now proven itself to be very, very capable. Now the question is, Leader McCarthy, how do we expand it? And how do we take what we've learned in low Earth orbit all the way to the moon and then onto Mars? And so when we said we're going to land on the moon under the President's Artemis program, we said we're going to go with landing systems that can go back and forth from a gate, we call it the gateway. Think of a space station in orbit around the moon. But we want landing systems that are going to go back and forth to that gateway over and over again, so we can have more access to more parts of the moon. We want those landers to be reusable, which drives down costs. And we want numerous providers that are competing to be the service provider to NASA. And as you mentioned, there could very well be a future where they could be a service provider to other government agencies. Maybe one day Space Force could be that, a customer as well. But looking at the industrialization of space in general is what we are working towards every day. So there's two efforts. One is the supply side and one is the demand side. NASA, we want to be on the demand side. We want to be saying, hey, here's what we need, who can provide it? The private sector to be on the supply side. Hey, here's a rocket, here's a vehicle, here's a space station, commercial space station, here's a landing system that can go to the moon, and then we're buying services rather than owning and operating vehicles. So I think that's what the vision is. But ultimately, by doing this, what we're seeing, and we're having great success right now, is we're seeing the costs come down and access to space go up. We've been seeing that with satellites and cargo. Now, for the first time, we're seeing it with crew, and eventually, we want to apply this model all the way to the moon. And I want to say, just so everybody is aware, all of this is happening in large part because of your leadership, Congressman McCarthy. And I'm not saying that because you're here. I'm saying it because it's absolutely true. This has been something that's been on your agenda for a long time, and NASA is reaping the benefits of it right now.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, sir. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Garcia so that he may ask the question as well. Sir?
Yeah, thank you, Megan, and David. Great to see you again. Great for the business up there. Actually, the visit to Plant 42 that I had a couple of visits now. The first visit I had a few weeks ago was very enlightening for me. So I'll start with a comment, and this is really to the small business folks on this call. Don't underestimate the breadth and depth of these programs, and in fact, if you have your business development folks and your program managers doing their job, they should actually be overwhelmed by the number of opportunities. It's not just high-end technology per se, not only for just space and also aerospace, but also lower-level projects to serve the bases, to serve the infrastructure support, the IT. So there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for the small businesses here, and I highly recommend looking at those Space Force programs to help build base, to help drive down concurrency costs, and make this a worthwhile endeavor. I think my question is probably for either Glenn or Jen, and I think this is probably something that will come up from the small businesses as well. In a prior life, I was an executive at a large Tier 1 supplier and prime company called Raytheon, and we had really three challenges. On the heels of sequestration and the Budget Control Act, this president and this administration really started throwing a lot of money at the DOD and NASA programs, and it was a rising tide. But we had still a capacity problem, and we had a sort of a choke point with some of our supply chain, and particularly the small businesses. And I'll boil it down to three fronts, and maybe you guys can just address this real quick for the benefit of the folks on this call. One was the type of contracts. The large dollar values that you showed, Glenn and Jen, are fantastic. But one of the challenges that we had were a lot of these contracts, at least on the DOD side, were cost plus incentive fee type constructs with variable share lines, and it was a little bit of a disincentive for the small businesses to get in. So maybe you can comment on that and what can be done there to help that. With that comes the second one, which is these are typically lower volume, and and this is where I urge the small businesses to look at adjacent programs or opportunities to help synergize and maximize your ROI. But longer volume without necessarily some of the long-term commitments that you get out of other commercial industries. The challenges, that small businesses are looking at. Do I open up square footage to support a NASA program or a DoD program when I can be supporting Apple or some other? Not all companies are going to do this out of patriotism and out of the good of the country in our space exploration. So maybe you can address that. And then the third challenge that we typically had was just getting clearances. And so maybe at a very high level, I know we can't go into too much detail here, just talk about the implications of security clearances for some of these smaller companies and what do the contract slowdown requirements look like. So I know that's a lot, Glenn, to ask you, but maybe you just how are we making sure that these small businesses are incentivized to participate in this industry?
Well, thank you, Congressman, for the question. I used to be in procurement for quite a few years, so I can answer a couple of those for you. There is a problem with it used to be with the cost-type contracts. They are looking to change a lot of that, and NASA's been shifting more to firm fixed-price contracts or fixed-price incentive contracts, and they're doing very well with that. As far as some of the choke points in the supply chain, the SBA has been very good in working with us now, doing a lot of joint ventures and a lot of teaming, which also helps a lot with the security clearance issue. Because before, it was very hard to get a security clearance because you had to have done the work, but if you're trying to break in, you don't have the work. So now they're letting people do a lot of joint ventures and teaming arrangements. And also their all-school mentor-protege program really helps with getting some of that done too. So that's a good thing in there. I'm trying to remember your third question was...
Just low volume, sort of long-term commitments that a lot of these folks are looking for.
Yeah, see, that's a little bit of an issue because NASA buys onesies and twosies where I used to be on staff at Secretary of the Navy and I brought 1,000 widgets at a time every other month. NASA doesn't quite do that because we only build 1 or 2 spaceships or items per year with that. However, the one thing we have been doing is our large primes have been getting together in our small business councils and our large business councils, and they've actually been sharing the small businesses that are good success stories that they've certified. So if you do really good work for Boeing or Lockheed or Raytheon per se, they have been notifying the other companies, hey, we got somebody proven for you, and if you got something in this neighborhood, they do follow-on work with that. So we've been very successful in that, and that shows by the growth of our numbers. And one of the things that we do get looked at by SBA is the continuing number of small businesses that we do business with each year. So we've been having a little trouble with that with the category management, but I can tell you now we've been making up for it in our subcontracting dollars and with the small businesses being, I won't say shared among the large primes, but recognized for their work, and they've been working not only with Boeing but with Raytheon at the SAIC, etc.
And I'll just add a little bit.
That's very useful. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to add one additional thought to that, Congressman, that that's one of the reasons why the SBIR program is so useful to look at as a complement to the other opportunities to work with the agency, in that SBIR and STTR, only small businesses can compete. So small businesses are competing against each other for those awards. It's a reliable annual funding source. And in some ways, it can be training wheels for figuring out how to work in the broader contracting ecosystem within the government. All of our phase 1s and phase 2s are firm fixed price contracts. And we try to make it as easy as possible within the realm of government contracting to work with the agency through these SBIR and STTR contracts. And we also don't do any classified work through the SBIR or STTR program, so you're not necessary to have a clearance. That's not a pre-requirement to get in to work with us on technology development. And one thing that we really emphasize in working with our firms, to Glenn's point about onesies and twosies, we like to say, and I'll credit one of my colleagues at JPL, Mark Davidson, for this, that NASA tends to buy in quantities of 5. 1 to bake, 1 to break, 1 to shake, 1 to put on the shelf, and 1 to fly. And so that a full market does not necessarily make. And so when you're thinking about one of many customers, think of us as one of many customers. And that's one of the reasons why we invest in things like the I-Corps program, to help our firms figure out how they identify other customers, other markets for the investments that they're making. Because NASA isn't necessarily the sustainable customer that's going to grow your VC trajectory business stream. right, given just the frequency with which we buy.
Yep, perfect. All right, I think you removed a lot of the alibis and excuses for folks not to participate. It should be music to the ears. And to the leaders, the small business leaders on this call, I just go back to what I started with. Do not underestimate the breadth and depth of this opportunity. This is much bigger than the one source of SOT or the RFI sitting on your desk right now. And look long for line up on this one. The investments that you're going to be asked to make, if you are definitely going to have ROIs, and really appreciate that. So thank you, Glenn and Jen, for those comments.
Thank you so much. I do have two quick questions I'd like to get to. Real quick, we have a question from Jeff Chaplock. Relative to what Congressman Garcia was relating about at Plant 42, our small business architecture firm, Development One, has a current contract with NASA. Will the Artemis program require any new facilities or additions, upgrades to existing facilities at Armstrong/Plant 42? I think this is directed towards Director McBride and Administrator Bridenstine at this point.
David, I'll let you take the first shot. Are you there?
Currently, we don't have any anticipated new construction activity in direct support of Artemis. Armstrong has a generally small part of the Artemis program. We supported the launch abort testing last summer, but we do have some growth needs in our aeronautics and science research activities.
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. We're working every day at NASA to be more efficient, and so when we do construct a new building, it's usually because an old building is at the end of its life, and we have a kind of a mandate to reduce our footprint, not grow our footprint. And I'll tell you, we've got a lot of buildings left over from the NACA days before NASA existed, when we were the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics before 1958. So we've got a lot of really old buildings. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, maybe not directly related to Artemis this time, but see, Glenn mentioned the 10 NASA centers, and they're all going to have needs in the years ahead. So I would look at those opportunities.
And if I can say something very quickly, when you guys get the charts, if you can look at that chart where I showed all the centers and what they're doing, we actually have like 4 regional construction contracts. And I think, and this is guessing off the top of my head, I know most of them are small business friendly compared to large. So I know like the MAC-2 down at NSSC has 9 or so small businesses and only 3 large businesses on that construction contract. And they're setting up 3 more of them that I'm aware of. If you look at that chart, you'll be able to see exactly who's going to be doing all of the construction, and you're familiar with those centers.
Yeah, and so when Glenn mentions NSSC, that's the NASA Shared Services Center, which is at the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. So look at all those opportunities, and Glenn has those charts for the different centers.
Correct.